Let's talk about books. These are the books I read in December 2025. Let's just start. Okay. The first book I read. We're doing them in order. I'm back to doing them in order. The book ladder was fun, but also it actually wasn't that fun. And I love the chronology, just feels good. So the first book I read is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. This is a fantasy novel. Sometimes it's classed as a YA novel, which stands for young adult, but I think genre-wise, like if you're in a bookstore, you can only put it in one section, the YA section or the adult fantasy section. So we put it in YA at the shop after reading it. I felt like it could just as easily be in the adult section. Regardless, it was my first step into stepping away from romance, which I had just a terrible run of reading romance novels. So I said, I'm not reading any, which there are none in here. I succeeded at that. And I'm going to do another genre that has like an equal chance to completely disappoint you. Which I guess you could be like, well, all books. True. YA specifically. It can be very silly and terrible. It can be silly and great, or it can just be great. And I often feel like you never really know what you're gonna get. The seminal example of that for me is Tahereh Mafi, who wrote A Very Large Expanse of Sea. This is a fantastic book that I almost didn't read because I had read Shatter Me, which is one of the same author's earlier works. And the writing style is so different. And I thought it was a mess in Shatter Me. And Anyway, and so Ab gave me this one to read, and I put it on my desk and just left it there. I was like, I'm not reading anything else by this author. Then I noticed it had been longlisted for the National Book Award, which the writing and the whole situation of Shatter Me was so far from that I was like, let me at least. So I kind of just flipped it open and read a couple of pages, and it's this scene where the main character and this guy from class that she doesn't really know cut class and go to IHOP together. And it's so well written. It's so funny. It's really, really endearing. And all of these feelings that I just did not have the whole first series of hers that I'd read. So I decided to read it. Thank you, Ab. And it was so good. And it's a beautiful story, and it's just exactly what you want a book to be. The female main character is Muslim, and it's set in 2003, so shortly after 9/11. But it's just high school. She's just going to high school, and the popular guy likes her, and it's everything that goes with that, right and wrong. And anyway, also his name is Ocean, which is so so good. So YA up and down. I also should get, but I just got settled. Ally Carter is a great example of really fun YA. And then, we got some more in here. So, well, I say that, we actually have 2 YA nonfiction books, which is a whole other thing we're into. I don't really think I did that on purpose as part of my YA project, but that's nice for continuity's sake. Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo is a fantasy novel set in a world that's kind of called the Grishaverse. Grisha are people with these magical powers. And I'd been told it was a heist novel. So this is a duology. There's 2. There's a trilogy that's called Shadow and Bone. It's set in this same world. And then she has another totally different series called Ninth House. And I don't know how many are in that one. I think I might have enjoyed Ninth House a little bit more. Hard to say because I did not read it. But this one was pretty fun. It was a little bit sloppy, just a little bit, but it's a heist novel. So you really can't be sloppy if you're writing heist, because what's cool about it is how precise everything is and how the characters are so in control and how they know exactly how everything's going to go. And the fun of it is you as the reader getting to experience that with them. And there were certain times where she pops around multiple points of view, which I'll come back to, but there were certain times where I didn't know who knew what, and it made it less cool to read. So one of the people, this isn't really a spoiler, who joins the crew, you're watching him on the ship, and then someone's like, he's actually hiding out here from his really wealthy father. He's like a aristocrat, and you're like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. But then also, like, 3 of the characters didn't know that, which would have made it 4 times more shocking. Like, these people in the crew are supposed to know each other, and they didn't know, in addition to me not knowing, that he's an aristocrat who's hiding out from his father. But you have to deliver that in the way that it's going to be the most powerful and the most shocking. And there were just little moments like that where I was like, just don't think about this too hard. I wouldn't be surprised if Bardugo has grown a lot since this one came out, and I would totally read something else, but I'm not going to read the second one in this series. It does the thing with points of view. So in a novel, you can be first person point of view, which is like, I went to Mars and blah, blah, blah. You can be third person, which is when you're like, Inej, or Kaz is the main character in this one. Kaz went to the merchant's house, blah, blah, blah. And with third person, you can do what's called third person attached, where you follow the same character. You're attached to the same character the whole time. This one did third person attached, switching every chapter between different characters, which you can sometimes do effectively. I talked about that with Notes on an Execution and Northwoods. Magically, these 2 are next to each other up on the shelf. Both of these switch between being an attached point of view between different characters, and it's so easy to keep it straight. It makes the book better. And the other option is to do a third person POV attached. That makes the book worse. What's a bummer is that you don't have to do third person attached. You can just do third person omniscient, which is where you are the narrator, you being the author, and you know everything. So you can just bounce around to different people. And I feel like I might not be explaining this right. I might need to go back and relearn the specifics of it. But what the issue was in this one is the beginning of every chapter tells you who you're going to be following, which, you know, I always say it should just be clear. Like, you shouldn't have to say it. And also, sometimes it's just a way to funnel the information. I said this with These Summer Storms, in a way that's easier for you as the writer and doesn't actually contribute anything to the reading experience. So that's what I thought about this one. But I mean, there was some good character tension, and the characters were these, I mean, the main guy was a bit like moved to the city super poor, lost his brother, and then built himself this gang in the underworld that's super powerful. And now he's in charge of one of the gambling houses and part of the docks and whatever. And so all of the power and the relationships between the characters and the spying and the different ways the world works was fun. So if you aren't super critical of writing when you read, which is fine, this might be like a slam dunk for you. I thought I had something else to say, but I forgot what it was. So, also, after Six of Crows, well, I should say this. I was so kind of obsessed with the characters, which I think is a hallmark of YA. Like, you kind of feel like you're a fangirl. Like, this is a boy band, and you're 12, and I went and typed it in on YouTube because there was a Netflix. Oh, because Shadow and Bone got turned into a Netflix series, but they kind of did Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows. And so then there's all these scenes of this, like, for real, you can watch it. You know what a TV show is. I'm like, you can watch it on the screen. I don't have Netflix, so it was like watching fans who have compiled the TV show into like funny edits, which is actually kind of the best way to watch a TV show because it takes like 5 minutes. You just hit the high notes. So I was that into it after it that I was like, I need to go watch the trailer for this show, and then I went down that rabbit hole for 30 minutes or something. The next book I read is Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins. So you guys know I read The Hunger Games for the first time this summer. I had read A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I'd also read Gregor the Overlander, which is a different series. Catching Fire was great. Obviously, everybody knows that. I wrote my review, I care! ! And I just do. Like, I just care so much, and I thought it was so interesting to read a book where something that I didn't really get from the movies, like at the beginning of this one, she's about to go on her victory tour, and President Snow comes to her house, which I don't think he does in the movie, but I haven't seen it in a long time. And he's like, there might be revolutions because people believe you were trying to be revolutionary by not dying with PETA, were you? And she's like, no, because she's actually kind of wasn't. She just wanted to survive. And so he's like, well, you need to tamp down any revolution. You need to be perfect. And then later in the book, she's like, he was just doing that to distract me. The revolution is already happening. It is out of my hands. He just wanted to make sure I didn't like click into that and make it even bigger of a thing. But throughout this whole book, she hasn't really decided if she cares about the revolution and if she cares about politically on a global or like a country scale what happens, because she's already had a really hard life. She already won the Hunger Games and she's guaranteed to have food and live in Victor Village forever. And she's like, I don't know if I want to put my mom and my family and Gail and my people in danger just for this huge thing that feels so outside of me that I also kind of have no power over. And I thought that was really cool. There's also a line in here about how when she is getting makeovered, which I love. So the line is about how she's like, they come in and like they shave my legs. They have to like remove all of my extra hair. And I was writing an article at the time about not shaving my legs. And one of the things that I realized when writing was like, that's not something that I like ever came across when I didn't shave my legs, which I felt like it was something that once I stopped doing, I would notice other people who didn't. It like never happened. And so then I started becoming super aware after I wrote that of being like, does anyone ever talk about this? Specifically like leg hair and not shaving, which there was sections in Perfect Me, which we talked about last month, about specifically hair removal, because it's kind of an old new beauty standard. So like it's been around for 60 years or something. It's not as new as a lot of the expectations of Botox and whatever the other things are called. Anyway, so I was like, oh my gosh, Katniss in the Hunger Games and me and Heather Widows are the three people in the world thinking about this. Katniss is like, this is just how my legs are, but apparently they want to change that. And I was like, okay, let's see if we're missing anything else. It was good. It was so good. The other thing I was going to say is I had seen the movies and I really felt like reading the books has been a different experience from the movies. And I have made sure in the past couple years not to watch them all, which helps, I think, the reading experience feel fresh. But the moment in the book when she's at the Victor interviews before the Quarter Quell or whatever, and Cinna has made her this dress that's a wedding dress because she and Peter are going to get married. Then she spins. I had kind of forgotten so well. And the way that Collins writes it turning into a mockingjay with the wings and everything and then lighting on fire was like goosebumps. Like it was so good. And it was so fun to be like, oh, there's some things that you think are better in movies and some things movies can do that books can't, but it's the moment can be so powerful too when you're just reading it. And obviously as a writer, like I love when words make something so just amazing and make you like care and feel something. And so I loved that. The next book I read is High Heel by Summer Brennan. It's in the Object Lessons series, which there were a ton of books published by Bloomsbury that are this big about specific objects. They all look the same. And I had heard about High Heel years ago. I do not remember where. It's about high heels, which obviously makes it very interesting to me in the vein of cultural expectations for women that don't really make sense. So I had my eye out forever. It's out of print from what I can tell. I actually bought this off eBay. So I did finally, though, just go buy it on eBay. It was great. First of all, it compiled so many different pieces of research and so many different ideas. So she starts Well, not sequentially, but one of the things she says is, I was expecting to start with fairy tales because high heels specifically with Cinderella, but shoes in general have a lot of power in fairy tales. And she talks about how in the original Cinderella, the stepsisters cut their toes off, like with this kitchen knife, to make their bloody foot, fit into the shoe for the prince. And then she realizes she has to go back even further. I mean, she has so much interesting analysis of that fairy tale and of all these different fairy tales. There's one about, I've forgotten, it's called The Dancing Shoes, something in the Dancing Shoes. And the girl does something like go to a wedding or go to a dance, or she buys a pair of shoes she wants or something, and then the shoes get cursed because she was so bad to like want something, and then she like dances forever, like she can't stop dancing. She has these shoes on, and they either cut off her feet or she like dances into the forest like eternally and dies in there or something. Crazy. Fairy tales are crazy, and what they say about how we tell stories and fables and how we think is so interesting. She realizes she has to go back further because she starts to think about walking, which she talks a lot about, this Rebecca Solnit book about walking that I think sounds so interesting. But she goes to, like, high heels are about walking, and walking as a woman has always been kind of this fraught thing. So she goes to Ovid, which I don't know if I have him. Well, I can't see half my classics, but he's not on the side I can grab. And Ovid writes a lot of the myths that we know from ancient times, and one of them is the story of a nymph, and she's trying to run away. I think it's Daphne and Apollo. And because the god who wants her can't have her, he turns her into a laurel tree. Details are fuzzy, but I read this like a month ago. And she talks about how that is robbing the woman of her mobility because her feet turn into roots and now she's tethered to the ground. So she was supposed to be able to run away and she didn't get caught by him, although maybe in some versions she did, but it doesn't matter because she's caught permanently where she is on the ground. And then there's just stories about the actual shoe. It was just so good. I just love nonfiction that takes something super specific as a jumping off point for all of these different ideas. And it would probably be worth it to look up object lessons to see if there's any that fit like your interest level, like this one fit mine. But this one was fantastic. Oh, she not only referenced Rebecca Solnit, who wrote Recollections of My Non-Existence, which I have in my to be read. So I haven't read any Rebecca Solnit except Men Explain Things to Me, which is this is Recollections of My Non-Existence, which I haven't read, but I started. The Portable Feminist Reader has an excerpt or an essay by Rebecca Solnit called Men Explain Things to Me, which is a phrase that I have like used or heard, but her essay is the one that like kind of canonized that phrase, if not, coined it. And it's about, she's at this party and this guy asked her what she researched. It's like this older man, it's in Aspen, Colorado, it's this fancy party, and she's like, oh, I researched blah, blah, this super specific thing, and he's like, starts explaining this book that just came out about that to her, and then she realizes it's her book he's explaining to her, and she's like, oh, that's my book, and he like, anyway, so good. It's short. Not only did Summer Brennan reference Rebecca Solnit, she referenced Roxane Gay, who is in the Hall of Fame, and Gia Tolentino, also in the Hall of Fame. I'll pull those down because I haven't. Well, there's more Roxane Gay up there than this, but this is Bad Feminist. This is the version that I bought. This is Hunger. Bad Feminist is up there. This is Hunger, her memoir, it is such a powerful book, and I can't recommend it more. This is Gia Tolentino's Trick Mirror. It's an essay collection that also sold like crazy in 2019 when it came out, which is super cool. She's so sharp. And look, Rebecca Solnit blurbed it. So it's a big happy circle here. But you don't belong there. And then the next book I read, you're kind of unwieldy and in my way. Sorry you can't see the pile anymore, but my comfort takes precedence. The next book I read is The Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon, Volume 2. I loved Volume 1. I have right here, in case I get interrupted by Dakota and have to kill time, Volume 3. I've read it that much, like, since this time last night. Guys, giggling and kicking my feet. That's a phrase the girls use on the internet. I don't really feel like it gets me until I open this book. These are so good, and they're so fun. There's like 20 of them or something. They're so thin. The main character is great. All the characters are great. Everything that happens, like, and it's told in the style of you're reading her journal, but obviously it's the olden days, so people actually journaled, and so it just super works, and you'll sometimes get some correspondence and stuff. She just has such a funny eye, and the way that she, oh, I just love them. I just love them. So I might edit in if I feel, I don't like editing, so I just don't really do it as much as possible. But if I feel like it, I'll pull in a shot that I got when I was testing the angle and light. That was bad, so I changed everything of when I was reading this book because I started just laughing out loud and it's recorded. Which some book YouTuber people record themselves reading, but really guys, I don't need to record myself any more than minimally required, so maybe I'll put that in. Then I read Joyride by Susan Orlean. Susan Orlean wrote this book that Casey gave me called The Library Book. I think she gave this for me Christmas 2018, which is about when it came out, which we know, you can tell because it's in hardcover. And the story is so cool. It is about so much. It's about libraries and library books. It's also about the Los Angeles Public Library, which was the victim of an arson attack in the 1980s. And it's like the largest library fire in American history. And this book is so good. It was in the Hall of Fame for a long time. It's like what you want nonfiction to be. And it was my introduction to Susan Orlean. And until Joyride, it was all I had read of her. Completely, actually. She writes for the New Yorker, or she did for a really long time. And she does, short form stuff, but none that I had encountered. I really, really, really thought this book was so well done, and it really stuck with me as a book that was so well done. And it's one of those nonfiction books that just jumps around, but does it like so well. Anyway, I would so recommend this. And if you don't like nonfiction but kind of wish you did, this or Boomtown by Sam Anderson is a great book to give you that feeling of being propelled along by a really compelling story. So then she came out with a memoir, and I decided to read it just kind of out of nowhere. And then I bought it, and then I read it. It did not sit on the table of please read me, I'm waiting books. Right now there's like 15 over there, maybe more. In nonfiction and fictions. Anyway, it's a whole thing. Usually, whether I read a book, and we'll get into this with the arcs a little bit, what makes me read a book or not, but sometimes, I'll just say this, a book just jumps the TBR, which is to be read. It's the list of books you want to read. And sometimes books are around for a long time, like this Rebecca Solnit book, like Portable Feminist Reader, which I've only read the Rebecca Solnit essay from, but Joyride jumped it. It has really clear prose, which you know you're going to get from Susan Orlean. I knew it after how she wrote Library Book. And it tells the story of a writer and of her career. And it was so interesting because it was so cool to hear about what it was like to write for the New Yorker, when it's like you had an idea and you would just get to fly out to like interview someone and see if there's something there. Like when there was money in legacy media, which to a point there is now, but like not like it used to be. So it also kind of was a little bit sad to be like, this is how this used to be and it will never be this way again. And I care so much about quality writing, and I think it's so worthy to give people money to just be curious and then write about what they find. And so much of her writing is so interesting and so strong. So it was kind of bittersweet that way, but overall it was pretty good. I loved reading her describe what it's like to write a book. So she's written more than 3, but the 3 main ones are Saturday Night, Rin Tin Tin, and The Library Book. There's a couple others, but those are the 3 that I was most interested in, because the other ones are kind of essay collections, I guess. But she talks about, this is what the idea that I had. This one started out as an essay. This is how I decided to gather info. And especially for Rin Tin Tin, Saturday Night is organized by every chapter. She spends a Saturday night at a different spot in America with a different group of people, which sounds so cool. I would love that. I would go find that now. I don't know how much it's printed, but Rin Tin Tin is the first one where she really had to figure out a structure. And structure is like the most important thing with a lot of nonfiction, and especially if you want to do something a little bit creative. And as you're researching, you're getting all of these different pieces of story. So Rin Tin Tin was a TV show in the 50s based on a movie star during the silent movie era dog named Rin Tin Tin in the 20s and 30s, who was actually a real dog that a soldier had found in Germany during the war and smuggled back to America. And so she starts researching all of these different pieces of the story and then blends them into this really cool thing. And I loved hearing how she found the themes of the book through the process of researching and writing. And that's something that I think people maybe don't understand about writing, is that nonfiction specifically, you don't know where it's gonna go or what you have to say before you start so often. And sometimes you write because you know exactly what you think and you need to get it out. But even with something like that, I mean, it's a book of facts, and same with this one, it's a book of facts, but you aren't just saying there was a fire, there were firemen, there was a inquiry into who did it, they think maybe it was this guy. As you compile the facts, you're also developing a theme and what you're trying to say about human nature. So with Rin Tin Tin, she's talking about like a desire for immortality and the ways that we create value. Like this soldier's most valuable relationship he ever had, even though he had a family and he had kids, was with this dog. And he cared so much about taking, like after silent movies went out of style, the dog wasn't as much of a thing. And so then he took him touring and like on the vaudeville circuit and all this stuff. Anyway, and so she talks about how as you work and as you research, you take notes and you feel, oh, The Orchid Thief. That's the book I was trying to think of instead of Saturday Nights. That's the first nonfiction book she wrote. Yes, where she really had to fit things together and develop a theme. That one, then Rin Tin Tin, then Library Book. The idea that as you write, you are creating something for the first time. And it was cool. It was so cool to read about. And she talks about, it might not have been Tracy Kidder, John McPhee, who wrote a lot of great nonfiction. But the only book of his I have is draft number 4, which also I was given a second copy. I had a copy and then Dr. Brammer gave me a copy as a graduation gift, I think, which is so sweet. And John McPhee's a super famous, super talented writer. She read that he used to write his notes for his books on 3x5 index cards and then arrange them all. So that's what she does. Even that is so cool and interesting too. So I love writing. A memoir about a writer is kind of catnip for me in a way that reading fiction about writers is the opposite. That's what I don't like. This gives me what I want from that. So one thing I will say is it's very charmed, and I think it's great that some people live a charmed life. I wish everybody lived a charmed life. Most memoirs that I read and care about are about trauma. And so to read this one where she's like, well, I moved to New York and then I just kind of started writing for New Yorker like after maybe a year, I don't know, and I just kind of like lucked into that. And then my husband and I were like, well, do we want to build a house in the Hudson Valley? So we lived there for a while, but like then we decided to move to LA, and so we rented a place like in Santa Monica and really loved it. Like that kind of thing. Like, I mean, that's fine. Like that is what happened in your life. Very different for a memoir, which you can tell from the title. It's called Joyride. So it was a good read and so well written. Such a smooth read. So Susan Orlean. Guys, okay. The next book I read is the only book that I disliked from this month, which is super exciting because I didn't finish it. It's an ARC, and so it doesn't even really count. ARCS stands for Advanced Reader Copy. It's a book you get before it comes out. The first time I encountered an ARC was for Thick, which was a gift to me from Megan, who was, I think, looking up people similar to Roxane Gay, which is such a loving way to shop for someone you love, back in 2018, and she got me this book. I was confused because it says this on the top, and then it says not for sale and all this stuff on it, and on the side it says 1 out of 19. I was like, what does that mean? And then there would be commas in really weird places, and I was like, this woman is so smart. It's weird that her book has commas in the wrong places. Guys, it's an ARC, an advanced reader copy. Uncorrected proof, not for sale is what they usually say. And if it helps, you see, now I have the real version too, which kind of happened on accident, but it's a book worth keeping. And you can tell this is a very marketing forward. This is like, has strips of marketing info for a bookseller, whoever you may be. So this was my first encounter with an ARC, and you encounter them a lot as a bookseller because it behooves writers and publishers for booksellers to read books before they come out. Because as we've said, sales are highest right at the beginning usually. And so if someone in the store has read a book and can talk about it to people who are shopping, and new releases usually get really good real estate in a store, better than they'll have a couple months down the line where they'll just be facing it on the shelf. It can be huge for sales. So this was a book that we got sent to the store just generally from Delray, as you can tell. And this is a mock-up of the cover with this ugly white frame around it. The real book will have the cover all over the front, and then the back, like I said, will have blurbs and all of that. This comes out February 17th, and I got 90 pages in. Okay, let me start from the beginning. Now that we've talked about ARCs, we have a really good ARC that I really enjoyed coming out. This book is called Agnes Aubert's Mystical Cat Shelter. I don't know if I said the fake main character's name right, but the audiobook preview did not say the title of the book, which is annoying, so I can't help you there. By Heather Fawcett. Heather Fawcett wrote a book called Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies about a professor named Emily Wilde who goes to research fairies with another professor who low-key maybe is a fairy. And it was a success in a crossover. It's a fantasy book, so it's in a made-up world. And it was kind of like a critical success in a way that a lot of fantasy isn't. And I was a little bit curious about it. Not curious enough that I'm ever going to read it, but I saw this, I thought, let me check it out. So, the issues. No, first I'll give you a little bit of the premise. There's a woman named Agnes. She runs a cat shelter. We've established that I love animals, so already I'm in. She runs a cat shelter, but her shelter got exploded in a fight between magicians, and so she's looking for a new place, and magicians are bad and scary in this world. They're not normal. So issue number 1, pacing. It was way too slow. You usually, in a book, don't want extra stuff because it's boring. At the beginning of this book, she visits a place she might want to have her shelter. You get a little bit of the background set up, so it's kind of helpful. She goes home, she's like really tired, and she misses her husband who died, and she kind of feeds the cats, and then she goes out looking for a new shelter again and again and again. You visit like 4 or 5 shelters with her that she does not get to rent from. And it's not useful to you as the reader because you don't need to know the details of buildings you're never going to return to. Like, you can do like one where you establish the world and you get rejected to establish stakes of I keep getting rejected. Then you have to say she went to a bunch more, it didn't work, and then you have to bring her to the one that she's going to get to rent. And it didn't do that, which was an oversight because she finally finds this place. It's a little iffy, no one else wants it because it's magic. And she's like, well, it's super spacious and I can put up with, kind of ghosts in the basement. Turns out there's an actual world-famous, world-destroying magician who lives in the basement. I'm spoiling this because I don't think you should read it, but I should have said that first. I'm sorry. And then she just goes along with life after this guy flies out of the basement and like magical stuff and people. And 90 pages in, I didn't know what the stakes of the story were. I did not know how she was going to become involved in magic or this magical person. And that is way too far into the story to not know where you're going. It reminds me of Dances by Nicole Cuffey, which I read earlier in 2025. Same thing. It was the one about the ballerinas, and I was like, I was just wandering around New York going to dance rehearsal, having no clue why. And if your book is trying to do that, there are books that just are like, wandering around looking at life. The Rin by Anne Enright. I feel like it's one of those. But if your book is not that way, then you best not make it that way. So this I didn't finish, and I wasn't curious, and it wasn't bad writing, especially like at the sentence level, dialogue, everything was fine, but it didn't capture me. The next book I read is Represent by Dr. Michael Eric Dyson and Mark Favreau. So this, like I mentioned, is a YA nonfiction book. This is another cool way to get into nonfiction if you kind of want to, but you don't want to read something super dense. I actually think also if you want to learn a lot about something, but you don't want to spend a lot of time reading it, young adult nonfiction can be a really cool way to do that. It reminds me of this time I went to the library and found the kids nonfiction section, which is like just little picture books about real things in the world. And I checked out like 3 of them and learned all about Frank Lloyd Wright and returned them. Like, that's amazing. So approachable. This is one step up. There's some more words, fewer pictures, but this is called Represent, the unfinished fight for the vote. Teddy had told me to read this one and said it was a little book, which I saw it. I was like, that's not little. I thought you meant, little. But it is YA, so it actually has pretty big print and reads really fast. It's really friendly written. And it's an overview of the different points in American history and what suffrage looked like at each of those times. It was great to read. It took me just a couple days. And I had learned a decent amount of it because I was a political science major for my less loved major. Creative writing was the major of my heart. But for public admin, it's half political science. So I had run into like a decent amount of this info before, but it was great to rehear it and relearn it. There were also things that I had never known, like women in New Jersey had the right to vote until like 1813. Like, the Constitution was ratified in 1787, I think. And women could vote in New Jersey because it was the states decided who could vote for so long. and Black men who owned property could vote until like the 1820s and 30s, and then when that was repealed, that's right, like super interesting. And there were some things like that I hadn't heard before. A lot of the things you meet also different historical figures who just give so much to be able to participate in democracy. And I think it's too easy to take the right to vote for granted, and it is an unfinished fight, as they say, and it has been a fight. There have been a lot of people, especially Black people in the South, who have been killed because they wanted to vote. And so it's really important, and I would recommend this. Mark Favreau also wrote another YA book with a different author called Unequal, and so if you're interested in that, which I don't know what the subtitle on that one is, so you'll have to look up if you're interested in all, but Michael Eric Dyson is a theologian, I think, at Southern Theological Seminary or somewhere, an ordained Baptist minister and something, native of Detroit, Michigan. He currently lives in Nashville, Tennessee. And so this is a great book. And also remember that YA nonfiction exists and you should partake of it. And one of my books I love just got turned into YA nonfiction. And wow, we're really pulling from the Hall of Fame today. This is How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith. Really, really remarkable book. He was a high school teacher, then he went to get his PhD. This was his dissertation. He turned it into a book, and then a bunch of high school teachers would approach him and say, I need this as a book for my students. And so he adapted it for young readers, which is amazing, I think probably to make it shorter, because this is so readable. That was one of the main things that left me with this. It was so readable that I think high schoolers could read it reading level wise very easily. But like I said, YA nonfiction is short, and sometimes that's exactly what you need. The one that I have my eye on for that actually is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, I think is the author's name. It's a super famous book about nature and the environment, and it's written by an Indigenous woman, published by a small press in Minnesota. It is a huge bestseller, and Viv said it was super, well, I'm going to say this slightly wrong, but that it was just kind of winding and a little bit repetitive. And so when it came out as YA, I was like, it would have trimmed all of that. So that, or I've heard the way to do that one is to read out an audiobook. The next book I read is Because of Winn-Dixie by Kate DiCamillo. I have A Tale of Despero by her, which I read, I think when it came out when I was a kid. This is a beautiful book, and it's kind of ginormous. Oh my gosh, To My Sisters and Me with Love from Mama, May 2004. And then she bought it when she was on a trip for work in Reno. And then I got it in the Marie Kondo clean out. So she got rid of it from her library. And then I read it again, I guess, in September 2022. I had read it as a kid, and I think it's beautiful and so nuanced, and I think this is a great book. You also read about Kate DiCamillo in These Precious Days by Ann Patchett. There's like a whole chapter on her because Ann Patchett meets her, and then she's like, I don't really read kids' books, but I'm gonna read all of this woman's books because she's so cool and I love her. And then she's like, anyway, it's just a love story to Kate. And this is Kate DiCamillo's book, Because of Winn-Dixie, which did come out when I was a kid as well, and I had read it, but I wanted to reread it, and it was beautiful. It is so simple. It's crazy how compressed a timeline a kid's book is, but you don't experience it that way when it's at the appropriate reading level for you. It's like a whole world. This is really the story of a young girl and her dad, and they move to a new town. He's a preacher, and she makes a few friends, and then she hosts a little dinner party. That's the story. I wrote that a beautiful little book about new friends and old loss, perfectly paced and full of love for the wide range of humanity, which it really is. And it was lovely to read. The other book that made me feel that way when I reread it probably read this like maybe in high school, is from the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler. Some people say Basil E. Frankweiler, and I'm pretty sure there's no way to know what it's supposed to be, except I guess you could do what we do to find how to pronounce things, which is look it up on the internet. But this book I read as a kid and loved, and then I read it when I was a little bit older as a kid on the drive to Muskogee. I remember this, and I was like, the drive to Muskogee is 45 minutes, and I read that whole book. What? And so, anyway, this book is so good. This book is great, and I love to read middle grade. The next book I read was Lost Lambs by Madeline Cash. This book surprised me. I loved it. I read it in a day, which is crazy because that means I didn't do anything else because I'm not really that fast of a reader. Okay. So in October, Megan and I went to Heartland Fall Forum. The Heartland is what the middle of America calls themselves, which is kind of either hilarious or wholesome. And so the Midwest Independent Booksellers Association, which is related to the ABA, the American Booksellers Association, the Midwest one and the Great Lakes one, throw a conference, and it was in Indianapolis, and we went, and it was so cool to be around people who read books and love books. And there are so many publishing reps, which is just a representative from a publishing house, getting books into the hands of booksellers, which is largely who attends. It was so cool, and I was really discerning about what books I took. I don't read a lot of ARCs, like I said, and I don't want to own a lot of books that I haven't read. Like, if I own a book, I almost 100% of the time intend to read it, and then within a year, at least, if not sooner, do. So you're given so many books. I mean, people are leaving the trade show floor with like totes full, like dozens of free books, which is just magical and fun, and it's fun. It's so fun. This book was put in my hands by the FSG rep. So one of the ways I was just like making conversation is like, what is the book you're most excited about for next year? Or what's one that you read that you just can't wait for people to have? And she was so cute, and she was like, oh my gosh, she like went around to the back of the table and got this and came back. She was like, this book. She like put it in my hesitant little hands, and she was like, this is just the best book I've read in so long, and I just like loved it and thought it was so fun or something. And so I got it home, and I hung on to it even when I went through all the books from the conference and decided which ones and all that. And if I'm gonna read that, I need to read it. And I started it, and then I did not put it down. So it's weird. It is a weird book, but it is interesting weird. And what I don't like is a book that's weird because it's trying to do something cool that you have to think about really hard to figure out. And that's less fun to me. Especially if I'm not buddy reading that with someone who can explain to me what makes it good. Which is what I miss all of my English major friends. And getting to read books with them all the time. So this book is weird, but in a way that shifts at the end of the book, pretty leaning heavily into the plot in a way that was really earned, but also super fun, like super entertaining and different from a lot of books that are about, so this is about a family of 3 daughters, which is what I grew up in, and it's kind of going through a shift in the family dynamic, and they're all having various sort of breakdowns, and it wasn't too precious with that idea. It didn't just follow them through their boring days. Like, it really gave you a denouement that was like, what is going on? But anyway, I really liked it. So this is a really interesting counterpoint to Six of Crows, because this is a book that switches between third person attached point of view in a way that works so well, perfectly. You couldn't write it any other way. You're always oriented. When you aren't hearing from some character, it makes sense because they're doing something nefarious, and that's the middle daughter, and it's so funny. Anyway, what do you need to know? It's set, I think, in an unidentified suburbia of a coastal town. The dad works at the harbor, like people who check in and out the shipping containers, and it's all run through the software thing, and he doesn't really care about his job. And the mom isn't super happy with the marriage, and she's like, maybe we should start seeing other people. She's kind of flirting with the neighbor, and the dad starts sleeping in the car in the driveway. Like, this is all at the very beginning. And then each of the daughters have their own thing, and the parents aren't really paying very much attention to their kids. And they're all so well drawn and so, I think I would say, lovable. Like, they're really doing weird things, or they're not like being, good, but it's really it's really fun to read, and it's a really great, really well told story, which is really like what I want when I'm looking at fiction. So I thought it was great. And then I will say, if you tend to read genre fiction, which is what they call, I think that term is really confusing, but so it would be like if you read mystery, thrillers, romance, or horror, or fantasy. That's called genre fiction. And then there's general fiction, which weirdly is like basically all the same letters, and that's general fiction about whatever. Historical fiction is kind of included in that, though. Why? Why is that not genre fiction? Maybe it is. I don't know. If you read a lot of things like mystery and thrillers, and you want a book that'll get you a little closer to the edge of general fiction, or if you just enjoy both all the time, this book is so that. And I thought it was great. I thought it was easy to read. I thought there were parts that were so funny and sharply observed, and I wouldn't read much about it beforehand, because some of the like write-ups are like, the Flynns, an American family officially in the throes of dysfunction, and like I don't know. So this is an uncorrected proof. I hope they got the blurb better than that by the time it came out, but I thought it was great. Then I read, I think this is my last book of the year, and I finished it on December 31st, Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green. Interestingly, this is the first, it doesn't make sense to say that one, I'm holding an audiobook that I read this year, or not ever, but in a really long time. When I was a kid, we did the audiobook of The Wheel on the School, which I loved, so I need to go find that book, because I want to read all of the books that I loved as a kid and see if I still love them and if I want to put them up here. And I just got City of Ember recently, which I loved as a kid, so I'm going to give that one another read. Wheel on the School. I had Fairy Tales on an iTunes file, and I don't remember who bought them, because you had to buy them. But I was thinking about that when we were talking about High Heel, because I loved Bluebeard, which is this really creepy one where it's like all the dead wives are in the closet at the end. And I was thinking about how an iPod was the only way to have entertainment up in your bedroom. Like TV, you didn't have an iPad, so like TV, if you wanted to watch a show or anything, it was always downstairs. And so if I was, up in my room or on a plane or, going somewhere and wanted something entertaining, I had to have the audiobook of the fairy tale. So of course, then this is also a thing kids don't have to do anymore, is rewatch or re-listen to things over and over and over, which is something I think about a lot in the age of DVDs and the movies that I've seen so many times. Anyway, so finally, I thought, try an audiobook that you think is going to work. A lot of people at the shop said that they loved the audiobook of this one. John Green reads it himself, and it was great as an audiobook. It's a beautiful book, and there were parts where I was just driving around running errands, tearing up. I'll read you the write-up first, which, because I audiobooked it before I bought the book, I put my review on the online, and I haven't put it into the book yet. I always write a review. I really loved this book, and one thing I struggled with in terms of audiobooking was if there was a part where I wanted to mark it or underline it, I just would take a screenshot of where I was in the Spotify thingy. So now, in addition to writing my review in the back, I have to go through and find those parts and figure out what page that's all on. There's only like 3 or 4, but that's kind of silly. And as someone who likes to go back to what I read, that's something that makes audiobooks, especially audiobooks of nonfiction, which is what, if you're writing, you need to be able to reference. Usually it's going to be nonfiction. With fiction, it's not as much like a specific line I'm going to need as like thinking about the general themes of a work. So anyway, this is what I thought of it. John Green is a reader's writer, clear and concise at each level, sentence and paragraph and chapter and whole book. His research was wide-ranging, yet he presented it in a way that was so readable. He's amazing at connecting ideas across time. He zooms into specific moments and zooms out to look at systems with uncommon wisdom and agility, which is so hard to do and so cool when someone's good at it. I loved how he explained virtuous cycles. I loved how he explained the failures and successes of curing TB. I loved reading something this excellent, so clearly assembled with so much love. And this is another just great piece of nonfiction that is well worth your time and wouldn't take too much time, and is adjacent to some books that I love because I care about what they're talking about in a context that I didn't know almost anything about, especially because I'm usually interested in destitution and poverty in America, and this book is global in its focus because TB is a disease of privilege or want. And it was so great at just giving a really clear eye to a really difficult problem. And I was worried it was going to be really a downer and really sad, but John Green is a master of I don't know how to say this, like, it wasn't so sad or so devastating. And at the same time, it managed to communicate how devastating tuberculosis is and how many millions of people die from it every year. And the fact that it's something that's kept uncurable or untreatable by pharmaceutical companies artificially inflating the prices of drugs. And still, he argues for the ability to create what he calls a virtuous cycle, which is having someone do something right, which leads to someone else doing something right, which leads to something else, and that changing, in his instance, tuberculosis treatment for the better. So he talks about this one woman who got TB, and she sued this company. She lived in India, I think. Sued one of the patent companies to make the tests or the treatment cheaper, and now in India, this is better. And he's like, that alone has saved millions of lives, or hundreds of thousands of lives, and that never had to happen. But like, someone chose to start this virtuous cycle, to take the first step into changing systems. And that's something I think about all the time, is like, how do we change the systems that we have and make them better and more human and more humane? And so it was great. What were the faves? I mean, that one, Lost Lambs, Emma M. Lyon, Serious Hat Tip to Catching Fire, but we're not going to pull it up. Those are the 3. But I mean, just solid, almost solid all the way through. If you like really slow books about fake, that's a bad way to say it. If you like really slow books about magical cat shelters, then maybe Agnes Auber's is for you. Otherwise, choose any of these other wonderful books, or these wonderful books, and thank you for talking about books with me all year long. Good night.